Hey y'all, different setting for this video because we're doing something completely different. So there is a video floating around the internet as of right now, and several of y'all have contacted me about it in a slight panic because this video pretty much states that there's no difference between freshly milled wheat and store-bought flour, and that actually freshly milled flour is not really nutritious at all. So not only are we going to be making a video about it today, but it's actually going to be my very first reaction video. So hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, I teach you all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. I teach you how to be milling your own wheat using 100% freshly milled grains in your home, making it easy for you, and not only easy for you, but knowledge that it's the best for you. And I still stand by this, but this video that has come out has caused a bit of a kerfuffle, I shall say. And this is actually a video by Ben Starr. He's also known as the Ultimate Food Geek. He's more known of his shows like on HGTV, Food Network, The Rachel Ray Show, things like that. And from what I can gather, he travels and is basically a food geek, which I absolutely love. I also am a food geek and I love trying new things and all that stuff. Now this is a video, it's freshly milled flour and whole grain simple sourdough for lazy people, which sounds wonderful. And I was like, what's the big deal about this video? Until I saw the chapters and what people were telling me about it. So without further ado, we're gonna share my screen. I'm gonna be minimized down to the bottom, and let's watch this video and see what's going on.
Howdy folks, I'm Ben Starr, the Ultimate Food Geek. Welcome back to my kitchen. Today, I am breaking my silence on baking simple sourdough with whole grains and freshly milled flour. So, why is there this crazy trend of people wanting to mill flour at home? There are two reasons, and the first one, and it's the one that is usually cited by most people, is that freshly milled flour is healthier than flour that's been sitting on the supermarket shelf. Yes. And those people are not wrong. Freshly milled flour has a higher vitamin, enzyme, and micronutrient content than flour that's been sitting for 3 weeks. But that's not...
Yay! I'm glad he admits that. So that's good. That's good. I really thought he was going to take a super crazy, stupid hard swipe against freshly milled wheat and like really say that it was bad for you. So I am glad that he has definitely confirmed that yes, absolutely, it has more vitamins and enzymes and has more nutrients for you. But I know we're not done yet, so let's see.
Not the whole story, because the baking process destroys vitamins and enzymes. So while freshly milled flour may be at its most nutritious right when it comes out of the mill, when it comes out of the oven, it's no different than a bag of whole wheat flour that you bought at the supermarket in terms of its vitamin content.
Okay, that is actually not true. Not true, okay? And notice he's yet to cite any sources. I have a source, okay? Okay, so this is actually a source that was recently shared, and I definitely had to keep it because this was done by a study. This was back in July of 2024. And I will link this down below so you can read it yourself. This was done by the American Society for Nutrition. This is in News, Medical, Life Sciences. And they do actually state, basically what they did in this study is that they did mill the flour. 3 types of flour were intact whole wheat flour produced by stone milling. So basically what we do at home, we mill our own wheat. The second one was reconstituted whole wheat flour produced by roller milling. I'm not sure if that meant that that's the typical roller milling that the big mills do. And then they added in the brain and germ back in. So that's a little confusing. But then the last one was refined white flour produced by roller milling with brain and germ removed. So I think that middle one is, they did it by roller milling, but made sure they put back the brain and the germ. And what they stated was, in the 2 types of whole wheat flours, levels of major minerals remained virtually unchanged from kernel to flour to bread, while the levels of some trace minerals actually increased during processing. And in refined flours and breads, major minerals were reduced by up to 72% and trace minerals were reduced up to 64% compared with the actual wheat kernel, the wheat berry. So obviously this shows that the refined flour with the bran and germ removed, that was definitely less nutritious. But they're saying from the kernel, the wheat berry, to the flour, to the bread, the labels of those major minerals remained virtually unchanged. That means from milling to baking, okay? You've baked it. The level of the minerals pretty much virtually unchanged. Now they did state that vitamin E levels dropped substantially with each processing step, regardless of the type of flour used to prepare the breads. However, I will say, and they do say that breads made with all flour types contain less than 1/5 the amount of vitamin E as the wheat kernels. Now, as I stated earlier, is that it only takes 3 days from whenever that wheat berry is milled into flour for nutrients to oxidize, and that includes that vitamin E. So I am curious, was the flour sitting there for any length of time before they actually baked it into bread? The study, this one that at least the article does not say. So I will say that maybe it was reduced. Maybe vitamin E is reduced while baking. They did not make that clear, but that's why I always say mill fresh and go ahead and bake it and bake that bread to get the most optimal nutrients. They also say that the levels of carotenoids were also reduced when the flours were baked into breads and contained about less than 1/4 the amount of carotenoids as wheat kernels, the wheat berries. Now, this is not fully surprising that whenever you go from the wheat berry, which has the most optimal amount of nutrients in it, and then you start processing that, even milling your flour, that is processing the food a bit. We're not just popping wheat berries into our mouth. So there is some processing there. But according to this study, that from kernel to flour to bread baking, that the major minerals remain virtually unchanged in your whole grain flours. The mineral loss was significant when you refine that flour and remove the bran and germ. Again, study linked below, came out July of 2024. Now, do you know that I also a little bit of a rabbit trail here. This is the beauty of God's design with wheat, is because you don't just have to mill it into flour in order to consume, because if you sprout those wheat berries and say you use that in a cereal or granola, or maybe you do mill it or something like that, I'm not sure about the milling, but if you sprout the wheat berries and then consume those, I mean, that greatly increases, shoots the vitamin A, the vitamin C through the roof. Okay, so each time you do something different with those wheat berries, something is going to shift, something is going to change, but baking it doesn't make it the same as store-bought flour. That's absolute nonsense. Because one thing he also hasn't mentioned is that store-bought flour with no bran and germ in it means that you've lost the fiber. Okay, so let's say worst case scenario, all the vitamins and nutrients have been oxidized. Whole grain flours still maintain that fiber in it. That store-bought flour would not, regardless of the baking. So this part, bless your heart, Mr. Ben, no, it's not true.
Now, minerals, on the other hand, they don't change at all. You have the same mineral content in your flour at the moment that it's milled, 3 weeks later after it's oxidized and aged, and after it comes out of the oven, because the baking process and aging process do not destroy minerals, but they definitely destroy vitamins and enzymes. What?
Okay, so to break it down, vitamins like vitamin E, that's oxidized, but minerals, I think he's referring to things like the calcium, fiber, that type of stuff, like that definitely is unchanged.
What this means is a loaf baked with freshly milled flour is no more or less nutritious than a loaf baked with aged whole wheat flour.
I would disagree. The study shows that's just not true. That the baking does not greatly reduce the minerals with whole grain flour. Now, it does sound like that even if it's aged, again, it still has the bran and germ in it, but it has been oxidized. So I would say, yeah, again, he doesn't cite his sources, so I would say that that's just not true. Not true.
Period. you lose those vitamins during the baking process.
Nope. Okay, so we're actually just going to kind of stop it here because the rest of this video is him making the breads. And I do find it very interesting. I do suggest watching it because one thing that he does is he experiments with actually adding in ascorbic acid or vitamin C to the freshly milled bread. And that, looking at the pictures that he showed, it did give a better rise to the bread that he used with freshly milled wheat as opposed to the store-bought flour. Again, he's not 100% freshly milled wheat, but that is something that I would like to try in my 100% freshly milled wheat sourdough loaves, because that sounds like a very interesting experiment. And he explains the science and stuff with that. That's not the point of this reaction video. I was mainly reacting to the beginning part, not his recipes, because his recipes, he's not even using 100% freshly milled wheat. Like that's it, no store-bought flour. And that's all I do on this channel is only use wheat that I've milled myself, no store-bought flour at all. But go ahead and check out that video if that is your jam and maybe you're interested. But let us do a recap. So here are my thoughts of the things that he was saying. And we're just gonna put a nice little bow on this. The biggest thing that y'all are upset about, that I was getting questions about, concerns, was whenever he stated that, oh, it doesn't matter if you use freshly milled flour because when you bake it, all those nutrients are gone anyway, and it's just the same as store-bought flour. As I showed to y'all earlier, studies have shown that's simply just not true. Okay, it's not true. And also, as I stated, I do everything here from a biblical perspective. And here's what we know from the Bible. A few things. One is that Jesus compared himself to the bread of life. He is the bread of life. Jesus compared himself to bread. Why would Jesus compare himself to something that ultimately, when you bake it, is dead? You know, the fact that man can live on bread, that it is that nutrient dense. There's a reason why it's called the staff of life, because people knew if they were consuming it, which for thousands of years they've been consuming whole grain bread. There's a reason it's called a staff of life, because it is so nourishing to y'all. And people were baking their breads. I know we have examples where the disciples in the New Testament, you know, they were going through a wheat field and they picked off some kernels and they ate it. You can absolutely do that. But other than that, we are seeing baked bread every other time mentioning it. Jesus himself baked bread and cooked fish for his disciples on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus himself was baking. Okay, he baked the food. If it was not nutrient dense for us, if it was not good for us, why didn't he tell us, hey, don't eat this bread? He fed the Israelites manna. Okay, that was not raw wheat kernels coming down from the sky. It was a wafer. It was something that was cooked. We also see it in the sacrifices, fine flour that is brought, and the show bread that was made and on display in the tabernacle and then eventually in the temple. So we see baked bread over and over and over again. This is a good food. God repeatedly said that I will bless your bread. And we know that it's such a nutrient dense food, whole grain. So not only has science backed that up, but just looking back on history, the fact that people knew that they had to have grains to live, and that is because it is such a nutrient dense food. And no, the baking process does not completely eliminate all the good stuff. He did not mention the fiber aspect that comes with our whole grains. That bran, that's the fiber. And y'all, constipation and colon cancer, they are such huge problems with our Western diet because we're not getting enough fiber. And so much fiber is found in nutritious whole grains thanks to that bran. Yes, it messes things up and makes it tricky and frustrating when it comes to getting those very light, fluffy breads. But maybe we weren't, I don't believe that we were intended to just have the dainties of life, to be on white, highly refined, processed flour. That bread, whole grain, freshly milled, not only if you do it right, it doesn't have to be dense, y'all. Okay, that's what I do. I teach you this here. There are also other channels out there that teach you this as well, that teach you, hey, you can make delicious breads, cookies, cakes, tortillas, flatbreads, so many things with 100% freshly milled flour, no aging required. I actually say don't do that because you lose nutrients. Mill it fresh and bake it. But hopefully this kind of helped y'all a bit. I very much stand on truth, and I really like getting down to the truth of things, and especially on this channel, because it's what I focus on, is truth about bread. And that's why I wanted to address this video in particular, because once again, it's just another video where it's giving you a little bit of misinformation, a lot of misinformation about whole grain bread. And so hopefully this was helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other questions. I would love to hear from y'all. And if you really want to watch other videos about me debunking some wheat myths, got some videos up here for y'all. And if you want to make the delicious, simple yeast bread loaf from 100% freshly milled wheat, no aging required, check out this video here. It is absolutely delicious. You can do this. It is the most nutritious bread for you because God gave it to us. Jesus compared himself to the bread of life. And because of that, I know in my heart that this is food that God has given us for our good and for our benefit. And you know what? Science actually backs it up. So hopefully this was helpful, y'all. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Links for everything in the description box below. And I'll see you next week. Bye.